Good day and welcome to Rutland's podcast on 2024 fire door industry outlook. Today I've got Toby Lewis with me from Falcon Timber.
Glad to be here and glad to be invited.
Thank you, Toby. And we're just going to talk through some of the outlooks and forecasts that we've got, particularly looking at the BSEN 1634 and BS 476 topic. I noticed when you walked in, Toby, you weren't limping, which is when we met earlier in the year.
Yes,
you had this distinct limp.
I'd just come back from my folly in America. I do judo, and I'd entered the US Open, which was a big tournament.
Black belt.
I'm black belt, and I was representing Great Britain. I won my gold medal in my category, and I was full of the joys of spring. And when they asked me if I'd like to take part in an exhibition match afterwards, I said yes without even thinking. And I ended up being faced with a 9 foot, 147 kilo giant.
No.
And I came off second, very much second, hence the limp for a couple of months since.
You said 140 kg?
Yes, yeah. So he was, very much, he was the FD 120 to my FD 30 in our fire door world.
Yeah, in fire doors, we know a 100 kg door is a...
Yes, he was a door and a half.
Yeah.
Definitely a door and a half.
Yeah, it's good. So we just wanted to talk through what the latest is on BS 476.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of the dust has settled, isn't it? When it first got announced at sort of post-Christmas time, early New Year, that there was a lot of...
incredible amount of fever about it.
Yeah. And sort of wild speculation, and a lot of people were either, this will never happen, or it's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the dust has settled, and a lot of the responses have been mature from the industry.
That's
I think
good, yeah.
There's been a lot of... we've spoken quite a lot about it, obviously, and I know I've had similar conversations with other partners in the industry, and everybody's really taken a responsible, mature view of this.
Yeah, it's noticeably widespread, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, and I think there's been some really good work by ADSMA and other sort of industry bodies to try and get a cohesive response from the industry. Yeah. And I think what we've achieved is exactly that we've actually gone back to the government as an industry with a single voice, maybe differences of opinion within that single voice,
different accents.
But I think as a whole, it's really made the government stop and think, all right, okay, so these guys A, know what they're on about, and B, have responded in a grown-up fashion. And I think they've taken note of what has been said and the various factors within the fire door industry, that one sort of sledgehammer to crack the nut isn't going to work here. And I think that's become clear to the government, and that's why we're where we are today, in as much as really no further forward in terms of a definitive position. But I think what it's done is made us reflect on our own businesses individually and as a whole, and I think it's made the government think about really implementing any new laws will have to be in conjunction with us as an industry as a whole. And I think there has been a lot of, I said, grown-up discussions about this. Yeah.
So, Toby, what are the next steps, do you think, with the government's, the government's next likely steps as to BS 476?
I think it's going to be the announcement of a holding position. I think, like we said, December, January time, we're going to hear something. And I think what we will hear is an outline of the proposed timescales. Again, a lot of discussions that we're having with people who are involved in this, and have got sort of discussions with the government ministers and their local MPs and things. Everything's pointing to maybe a 2 or 3 year hiatus, and then maybe a 2 year grace period before something official and definitive is in place.
Yes.
So this, the whole idea of BS being phased out and EN being the only standard going forward, I think that's inevitable.
Yeah.
I think that's going. Everyone is in agreement that's going to happen.
Yeah.
The sensible money would be, say, in 3 years' time, they will start a 2-year grace period, where one will be phased out and another will be phased in.
Yeah.
And projects
like
start
a coexistence.
Absolutely, yes. And it'll be clearly defined, and it'll have to be clearly defined how one will still qualify whilst the other one is becoming the dominant standard.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the wording of that is what's going to take up some of the next 12 months.
Like in consultation, yeah.
Yeah. So I suppose it's, as I said, the smart money would be that we're going to get an announcement at the end of this year, early next year, to say in 12 months' time we will announce the timescales of the change.
And this is how long you've got.
Yes, so I think we've got the end of 24, where we'll find it'll be the end of 26 or 27, that the 2-year period of coexisting will start.
Yeah.
And then a definitive, well, will that be 2030, 2029 of the EN only era?
Yeah, and I suppose that defining, you mentioned defining what the boundaries are. It includes what constitutes a new project.
Yes.
Is it a refurb or is it just new build?
Yeah, and there'll have to be some clearly defined rules in terms of planning applications. Where, if you start a planning application before the January coexistence period, is it when you applied for the planning, or when you started the project, or when it actually gets approved, or when the project starts? Because your project can get approved in January and not start for 3 years.
Yes.
So it'll have to be somewhere in line with when the project starts, which I think that's where the wording will be key, and that's the sort of clarity that the whole industry will need as early as possible to know how to set their stall up for the next sort of 3 years and the lead up into it.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Just a look into the future then. What does...
I got my crystal ball.
Yeah, you got your crystal ball. What's the future look like without BS 476?
Okay, so I think initially there was a real panic and worry because the fire door industry has been built really on BS 476 as the main standard for evidence, and globally as well it was seen as the sort of gold standard, and in other countries that we're active in, that is the primary standard.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of panic, a lot of raised eyebrows in terms of we're going to take it away.
Yeah.
But ourselves and a lot of our contemporaries and people like yourselves, we're already well advanced in our EN testing. EN testing was always part of our business plan. Yeah. I think you talked earlier. You said 2008 was it your first EN test, and I was very much a similar thing. And we've had XAPs for EN testing in our portfolio of test evidence for some years. So the plan now, since the announcement, is just to accelerate that EN testing. I don't think anybody would be testing to BS 476 now. It's sort of maintaining your BS evidence, but really accelerating your EN evidence.
Yeah, that's good.
But as an industry, if you were a fire door manufacturer, irrespective of what happens with these rules and when they get implemented and grace periods and coexistence, I think everybody should take some sort of solace from the fact that most of the people that supply that fire door industry, the component parts, were already well advanced in our EN testing and preparation for this. So I think there's some undue panic, and I think there's some reassurance needed from people like ourselves and our contemporaries in the industry to sort of make people aware that there's no need to panic.
You were talking about you feel like you're in a providing a safe haven.
Yes, absolutely. Because I think if people have only ever used BS evidence and they don't realise that there is a body of EN evidence as well within the supply chain, that they would be panicking and think, what am I going to do? Can I make a door from January onwards?
Yeah.
Well, first things first, it's not going to be January, as we just said. It's going to be a few years down the line. It'll have to be.
The panic's gone.
The panic is gone for immediate what's going to happen by the end of this year.
Yeah.
But what it's also done is given us chance to reflect on what we've got as an EN based test proposal,
and channel the funds and energy.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think what we've done is managed to talk to enough people in the industry to rest assured that you're in safe hands with us as a supplier, not just us Falcon, but us as an industry supplier in your fire door business. Yeah.
So, for those that are not really familiar with the standard, is there much difference between them? I think we covered this in our webinar in February, but the difference is between 1634 and BS 476, for anyone who's sort of not picked up on this before.
There are subtleties, and if you were a part of a technical team like our tech guys at Falcon would tell me there's hundreds of differences, and I know there are. But in essence,
sorry not to have Josh on.
Yes, although we'd have to have an extra hour on the podcast to include his opinions. But no, joking aside, I think that there's lots of differences within the two tests. But ultimately, you're putting a bit of wood in a furnace and you're burning it with a stopwatch. Yeah. So to break it down to sort of real layman's terms, that's essentially what we're doing. But there are just slightly different rules within the testing. Yeah. The one big difference between EN and BS testing is if you're doing a selection of BS tests, to achieve a scope of designs, you might have to do, let's say, 5 tests. To get the equivalent number of designs covered within EN, those 5 tests would probably be 10 or 15 if you were going to take it to the nth degree. Yeah. So there's a lot more tests to be done. Yeah. But we don't see that as a negative, because I think that actually brings in less of the grey, fuzzy areas that were allowed within the previous scopes. And I think this is exactly what the intention from all the Grenfell inquiries, Hackett reports, they're saying that it was a bit too woolly, that you could do 3 or 4 tests and get all this scope and desktop assumptions and things like that. But I think with EN, it is definitely, I've tested that with that and it lasted this long in the furnace. Essentially, it's that. So I think there's a lot of positivity to come from EN testing. The final products will be far more robust and secure in what they're claiming they can achieve. And I think that can only be a good thing. Mm-hmm. Although the transition period will be challenging, but I think as an industry we're up to that challenge.
So we've talked a little bit about the uncertainty and fever that this all created earlier in the year. I'm still getting questions coming through. We had one the other day from a housing association saying, how will this all affect our existing doors in existing buildings? So doors that have maybe been put in and they've been tested to BS 476. There's a question around what do I do? How does it affect me? What do I need to do today as a property owner or housing owner? You'd have some thought on that?
Yeah, I think the quick answer is, well, nothing's changed. Today, nothing has changed. So BS evidence is as valid and legitimate as it always has been. Nothing has changed. There's only a proposal to change. So whatever they're thinking of doing for today and replacing doors in the new year, they should just carry on as they always have been.
Yeah, that's confirming. That's what we're trying to get that message across. It's don't worry about the past. But
yes. And obviously when they go into a grace period, we're talking about new projects and new planning applications. So if you're already an existing building with an existing fire door and you're just thinking of replacing it, or it needs replacing, then you do it at that particular moment in time. What was the legislation then?
What is in building control.b today?
That's the book of rules you've got to follow. So I think in terms of what happens today, it's a very much business as usual. But I would say that there's going to be a huge added focus in terms of the quality of the installation, the ongoing maintenance of that door, and the ongoing inspection of the door. Because one thing that's come out of the discussions about the change to the rules is we can all have our discussions and our viewpoints on the nuances of the new law. But unless there's a policeman,
the way it's tested and so on.
Unless there's a policeman to enforce those laws, we'll come up with the perfect design of door and door closer. And if somebody doesn't fit it the way that they should have fitted it, it null and voids all the evidence. So there's got to be a huge focus on the installers. Somebody's got to inspect the installation and also maintain the installation and inspect the maintenance going forward. So it's this whole sort of policing of the fire door.
Am I right? There's a little bit of a gap in the EN standard in that it's a fire testing standard and a product standard in the EN 16034. It doesn't mention anything about installation. I may be wrong, but where the BS 8214 standard, there's a British standard that for installation of timber door sets, timber door assemblies. There's not actually a European standard for installation and maintenance. I may be wrong.
But side of that, we all know that there's been a lot of fire doors fitted over the last 20, 30 years that weren't actually fire doors. They didn't comply to rules. And I think this is where we're going to see a little bit of a boom in the market in this retrofit, where people are going to be looking at their business, looking at their building, looking at the fire doors that were that had been passed, that somebody just tapped and said, that sounds quite solid and it's got a fire door sticker on it. It must be a fire door.
Nice veneer.
It's a lovely veneer, fantastic closer. But it's not actually a qualifying fire door. And I think there's going to be a huge focus on that. And I think that's where we're going to see a rush to get those illegal, non-compliant doors out of buildings and new doors put in. And I think this, when the new doors are put in, there'll be this focus to make sure that they stay compliant and nobody jams them open with a fire extinguisher, as we've seen, and things like that. So
that's good.
It's in terms of installation, maintenance, inspection, it's going to have a huge impact on retrofitting previously non-compliant fire doors, but also it's going to be front and centre in terms of new fire doors that are going to be built to that expectation.
That's an action for today. That's what we need to be doing today. And also everyone's aware that it's now mandatory to inspect fire doors every 6 months. Which would be another action. Are they getting inspected by competent inspectors?
Are there enough inspectors? Do the inspectors know what they need to be inspecting and what rules are they going to be following? At the moment, they'll all be following either a BS or EN certification. But going forward, we're proposing it's going to be EN only, but that's going to be years ahead. I think at the moment, we just need to get a bank of inspectors and inspector trainers and installation trainers, and I think there just needs to be this real acceleration in that area to back up what we're all trying to achieve in our day-to-day job with our various components, is to come up with
a perfect component,
absolutely,
fire door.
and all combining together to get the maximum safety and to save lives. And we really need the installation and maintenance inspection world to get up to speed with us. And I think there's some really good initiatives. We spoke earlier about the triple SE passport. And I think that's something that really we can get enthusiastic about, and as an industry get behind something like that. I know there are other initiatives, but I think that's an area that really, instead of us focusing on the nuances of BS and EN testing and the height of the pressure point in furnaces, I think we should all be focusing more on that.
How is it being fitted?
And getting some real sort of professionalism and constructive training around that.
That's good. And that is fire door responsible actors. It's all very well having the doors tested to a standard, but what is going into vetting and training the responsible actors, a bit like the Corgi gas. Gas appliances.
With fire doors, it's very much a self-policing industry.
Yeah,
we've created these rules, and we're working within this book of rules. But there isn't an official, like you have the Corgi or whatever it is now in the gas industry. There isn't a registered bank of people that have to go through a training course and a test and exam at the end. I think that there's definitely a need for that, but that is
watch
definitely
this space.
yeah. But there are lots of really good initiatives out there at the moment, and I think as an industry, if we can get behind those and share our knowledge. Who knows more about closures than you? Who knows more about door cores than me? A lot of people, but but I think
every day's a learning day.
It is. But I think as an industry, if we can support these with our best practice and our understanding and sharing our technical knowledge with the people who are setting themselves up as the trainers that industry, I think if we can get a certain amount of alignment there, that's only going to be good and make it a more robust industry going forward.
Yeah, it's good.
So I've done a lot of talking. And I think, what's your view, Neil, of the outlook for 2024 as a whole? There's a lot of question marks out there at the moment in terms of the economy, and we get some really positive headlines lately. But what do you see 2024 as looking like? Yeah,
the initial look at it is positive. I think we've seen a lot of retraction in 2023. But just being on the we had the Glenigans webinar this week. We were discussing earlier, and they're forecasting growth in the construction market. We were looking at some of the figures. Was it 2024? They're looking at a 12% increase in contracts awarded.
And you can see where they're getting that number, that confidence from. When you think that in the same report you've got there, it says that the planning application approvals were up 40% in 2023. But actual projects started were down 20%.
It's a massive pipeline of approvals.
There's a lot of stuff in that pipeline that has all been approved and is just waiting for the green light. And at some point, that's got to start. And I think there's been some hold up in terms of the confidence within the industry, whether that's cost of living, whether that's changes of legislation. But I think whatever it is, especially with social housing, the need is growing even more. So even though there's been
you were talking about the this immigrant crisis.
Absolutely,
one of the impacts
that a lot of the people that we've taken into the country are in hotels, but that they need to be settled. There needs to be some sort of permanent housing or semi-permanent housing built for that. And I know that a lot of that is in this pipeline. And that's on top of our indigenous need within the UK population,
which was already dire.
Absolutely, and some of the figures showing that we should have been producing hundreds of thousands, and we were doing tens of thousands of houses, doing 80s and 90s and so on. This huge backlog of need for housing is evident, and it's even more in the last sort of 12 to 18 months.
No, it's really looking positive. I think that's what we wanted to convey is a positivity for door manufacturers. They've got the capacity to make these fire doors that are needed, but also to landlords, make sure that the money is being directed to fire door replacement. Ultimately, it's life safety. So we're not spending money on bathrooms and